Good evening, and welcome everybody to the 2013 NFL Draft.
It's fitting that today's NFL Draft is at Radio City Music Hall because it's such a show, such a production. It's almost like the Academy Awards.
Hottest guy in this year's draft.
It's like the Miss America pageant. It's got a little bit of The Price is Right in it. Come on down. The ratings are comparable to what you get for a game in a lot of sports. It's really amazing that it's attracted this kind of attention. I would love to take George Halas by the hand and walk him into Radio City Music Hall and say, this is what the NFL Draft looks like. I swear he would swallow his dentures. He would not believe that this is what this thing had become.
That's why the Colts are picking second every year. Who in the hell is Mel Kiper?
Chargers select Eli Manning.
The NFL Draft has been part of the league calendar every year since its inception in 1936. Each draft has its own identity and unique narrative. Those stories will form the core of Caught in the Draft, a series that chronicles the distinctive characters and moments from anniversary drafts of the past 50 years.
Ricky Bell, fullback, University of Southern California.
We begin with the 1964 draft, viewed by some as the greatest rookie crop ever, producing more Hall of Famers than any draft before or since. The league called it the annual Players Selection Meeting, but by any name, it drew little interest from the public.
In 1964, it was just held in a hotel meeting room. You didn't need a ballroom. It wasn't big enough to put in a ballroom. You know, you just had some guys sitting around a table, cigar and cigarette smoke drifting up to the ceiling.
In 1964, the NFL was aware of the growing interest in football, but they were perhaps not acutely aware of how much interest there was in the draft. And one of the issues I saw when I was growing up was the draft was like this rumor. You knew it was taking place somewhere at some time, but trying to find coverage of it was hard to do.
It was hardly a national TV event. You're lucky if the entire draft in full was in agate type in your local paper the next day.
Many of those names listed were familiar only to scouts in the field.
Kid's got the physical too, so you just, have to take him and hope you can teach him the rest of it.
You did the bulk of your scouting during spring football practice. And again, in those days, there were scrimmages. You had an opportunity to watch the players perform. You got a really good inside look at each player at each university. In preparation for the draft, then what you did in September and October and the early part of November was just confirm pretty much what you saw in the spring.
This was the first season where NFL clubs pooled their scouting resources with opposing teams.
Showed a pretty good speed, though. Yeah. Too bad he's not about 6'2".
The first of these groups was a group called Blesto, which was Bears, Lions, Eagles, Steelers talent organization. It was just a more streamlined way of getting the information, as opposed to every one of the teams having to go out and scout every college and every player. Now you had a group of scouts that were regional scouts that would divide the country up into 8 zones, and you would have scouts work each of those 8 zones. It was just a more efficient and economical way of doing the job.
The NFL needed this united front to combat the efforts of the rival American Football League, which had held its draft 3 days earlier in New York. The fledgling AFL hoped that by getting a head start, they could beat the established league's teams to the punch and steal away some of the nation's top players.
The NFL, in seeking to keep many of the prospects like myself from signing with the AFL team, had instituted a practice that was called babysitting. There would be an individual who represented the NFL's interest to be with and to shadow a prospect to keep the AFL teams away from him.
We'd take players all over the place to keep them away from the other side. The big fear, I think, was to draft a player that you didn't have your hands on, know exactly where he was, or have a scout sitting with him at the time of the draft and not have any idea where he is. He may have been signed already and you drafted him and it was a waste of a draft choice.
The NFL signed every future Hall of Famer in the draft, including first-round wideouts Charlie Taylor and Paul Warfield. On the campus of Texas Tech, another highly regarded receiver had also made his intentions clear as to which league he preferred.
I wasn't interested in the AFL. The NFL, that's what I wanted. I would have liked to have gone to the Cowboys probably, but at that time, I didn't care. I just wanted a chance.
The Cowboys thought they had him. They're picking fourth. They fly Dave Parks into Dallas the Sunday before the draft. Cowboys thought, we're onto this guy. Nobody's going to take him as high as fourth. And here come the 49ers just before the draft, and they decide they're going to take him number one.
I was shocked. I had no idea that I was going to be drafted anywhere, not just number one. I'd been told that, and I'd heard that, but we're out in West Texas. What do we know?
The Parks family packed their bags for California. But another Lone Star State native was drafted by both Texas pro teams.
Most popular of the Longhorns was All-America tackle Scott Appleton, the much-acclaimed College Lineman of the Year.
During the NFL-AFL war for players, one of the prize catches in that year was a lineman named Scott Appleton, who was a defensive tackle from the University of Texas. Was, by everybody's reckoning, the best defensive lineman in college football. Texas won the national championship that year, won the Cotton Bowl against Navy and Roger Staubach, and Scott Appleton had a tremendous game. The feeling was if anybody was a sure thing in this draft, it was Scott Appleton. So he was a prize that both leagues wanted to get. And the Dallas Cowboys wanted him for obvious reasons, and the Houston Oilers wanted him for obvious reasons, because he was a hero everywhere, but nowhere more so than the state of Texas.
The Cowboys realized that we intended to get a real good receiver out of this draft, and we didn't. What are we going to do? They decide they're going to trade the Appleton pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers for Buddy Dial.
Brown behind excellent protection, rifles a touchdown pass to, you guessed it, Buddy Dial.
Buddy Dial was a terrific receiver in those years, one of the best in the NFL, made multiple Pro Bowls. The Steelers had lost Big Daddy Lipscomb from their defensive line. The previous year, he died in a drug overdose. So they made this trade, which was pretty dicey, trading a known quantity like Dial for the possibility of signing Scott Appleton.
Pittsburgh proved no match for the Oilers or their deep-pocketed and determined owner.
Bud Adams was an oil guy, and Bud Adams was not going to be outbid for a player if we really, really wanted him. Probably wasn't so much the money, although the money was very good that Houston gave him. But one of the contingencies of the deal was that Adams gave Appleton's family 38 head of cattle for their ranch. That probably is what sealed everything.
Houston's highlight film painted a rosy picture of Appleton's achievements.
Appleton has been living up to all expectations. He takes off like a halfback and nails Bill Mathis of the Jets. Appleton is probably the quickest defensive tackle in the league.
The truth was that Appleton was what draftniks now call a bust. He was undersized and ill-equipped to compete against top pro athletes.
He had some injuries, he had some off-the-field problems. Probably the pressure of what was expected of him had something to do with it. And as a result, his career never really got off the ground. I mean, we talk about the great disappointments in the draft. Scott Appleton is right at the top of the list.
The new league also got burned when a top running back in the '64 draft was chosen by the AFL's Raiders, the very first selection Al Davis ever made for Oakland.
We came here in 1963. We had several outstanding football players. And we honestly thought that if they could hold the line for us for a few years, we could gradually bring in this influx of great young athletes who were playing in the colleges throughout America.
The athlete Davis picked was Arizona State's Tony Loring, who quickly agreed to a deal. The only problem was that Lorick also came to terms with the NFL Colts after having second thoughts about the AFL.
Well, what ultimately happened was he ended up playing in the National Football League, and for the Colts, there was an agreement between Lorick and the Raiders that fell through the cracks.
Lorick said that all he had was a verbal agreement with the Raiders, that it wasn't a written agreement. Al Davis decided he wasn't going to fight it because he saw what the pattern had been in the past, and he said the judge always sides with the player.
We just felt that Lorick was a guy that could bring some toughness into our football team, and we stayed after it and finally persuaded him to feel that ours was the best situation for him, and I'm glad we did.
Unlike today's draft, which is held each spring, drafts in the mid-1960s were held late in the football season. The 1964 draft took place in Chicago on December 2nd, 1963.
You know, people wonder, why was it held in the 12th or 13th week of the season as it was back then rather than in January after the season? It was basically because football wasn't a 12-month-a-year job back then. It was 6 months, and when the season was over, the season was over. And that would be it, and everywhere to go home and go off to their lives.
The 1964 draft was held just 10 days after a national tragedy.
A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves.
I mean, it's like it happened yesterday. And it was on a Friday afternoon. I was getting ready to go to my thermodynamics class. And that afternoon, we heard the president was shot.
We were in the office, Tex Schramm, myself, our scouts, because we were preparing for the draft, which was a week away. We learned about the assassination probably about 1 o'clock. And then the rest of the draft seminar was out the window.
You're so close to the Kennedy assassination, feelings are still raw, and there's all this negative feeling towards the city of Dallas because that's where the assassination had taken place.
Everybody let their emotions, I think, hang out as far as how terrible everybody was feeling about losing the president.
During this difficult time, the Cowboys had much work to do. A long way from becoming America's team, Dallas was in the midst of a fourth straight losing season. Their team president had an innovative yet unproven approach to building a winner.
Tex Schramm was working at CBS in 1960 when the Winter Olympics were in Squaw Valley. He was fascinated at that time with what the Olympics did with computers, how they were used to process results, medal standings, times. And so when he became the president and general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, he made it a point to find out more about computers.
And he talked to some of these computer people and said, hey, listen, would there be a way to make this work if we fed information like heights, weights, speeds, and stuff of football players in here and you could rank them? And I said, computers can do anything. So Tex, when he took over the Cowboys, said, I think I have an idea here.
Saying one player is quick as a cat or somebody else is big as a house, those things were replaced by specific measurables. And this was sort of the very first instance of sophisticated math involved in coming up with the best players to draft.
In the modern draft, teams have far more information, but far less time for selections.
The Kansas City Chiefs are now on the clock.
Clubs are given 10 minutes to make their picks in the first round and even less time in the later rounds. In 1964, there was no time limit between selections, and it ended up being the longest continuous NFL draft ever. The 20 rounds dragged on for 21 hours and 43 minutes. The first round alone lasted more than 8 hours for just 14 picks. The Cowboys took nearly 3 hours to select Scott Appleton, the player whose rights they traded only 2 weeks later.
In the second round, they've got the 17th pick in the draft, incredibly high pick. So again, you want to be careful. And they want to draft Mel Renfro out of Oregon, but they're not sure about his health.
We sent Dr. Slocum from Portland, Oregon, down to Eugene to check him out.
While the doctor made the draft day trip to the University of Oregon, the Cowboys patiently awaited the results.
They wanted assurances that Renfro's knee was okay. He'd had a knee injury in college. And because there was no time limit, Tex Schramm was damn well going to take as much time as he needed. In this case, they were on the clock for about 6 hours. And so the rest of the league waited.
Vince Lombardi came up to us and started chuckling and laughing. He said, "What's wrong? Did your computer break down?"
The Cowboys finally went ahead and chose Mel Renfro, and then converted the star running back to defensive back. Dallas was willing to take chances on players not only from different positions, but also different sports. In 1964, the Cowboys signed Michigan State basketball star Pete Gent and made him a receiver. In the 7th round, they selected world-class sprinter Bob Hayes, who would go on to win 2 gold medals in the 1964 Olympics.
The record's still there on the track, but I'm not there anymore. I'm out on the football field. But if I can get the ball, I'm quite sure that I'll do something with it. If not, I shouldn't be playing in Dallas.
Many great track names have sought football fame, but Bob Hayes is a football player who just happens to be the world's fastest living human.
Bullet Bob Hayes wasn't able to hit the NFL until a year after he was drafted. The Cowboys had chosen him as a futures pick, a player who still maintained college eligibility, even though his class was set to graduate.
The futures rule existed for a long time, but it really became more prominent and more utilized in the 60s. When the NFL and the AFL were warring for players, futures were drafted a lot because it was one league's opportunity to get one step ahead of the other league.
You had large numbers of guys being taken, usually not very high in the draft because many of them stayed in school and played their senior year before they turned pro. But in the 64 draft, there were 76 future picks made out of the 280 picks in the draft.
That year, in addition to Hayes, the Cowboys used futures picks on Tulsa quarterback Jerry Rome, along with a player whose 10th round selection was almost an afterthought.
It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. We drafted continually. We drafted right through the night. And everybody had left from our group except Tex and myself. And the room was virtually empty, but the only thing around was a lot of empty coffee cups.
8 quarterbacks had already been selected by the time Dallas decided on the Heisman Trophy winner from Navy.
If Tex Schramm doesn't draft Roger Staubach, it's not like the 49ers were going to take him in the next round. He probably doesn't get drafted at all. He's probably a free agent. He knew Staubach had a 5-year commitment in the Navy, but he also knew at that point you're throwing darts, and so it seemed like a good flyer to take.
They knew they were going to have to wait 5 years. To get him acclimated to what they were doing, they would send him tape. They would send him a playbook that he could actually study, and they would also send him footballs.
You know, I remember getting a letter from him, and he was in Da Nang, and I had to send him like 24 footballs, and he said a mortar shell hit the tent 15 yards away from where we were staying and blew up all the footballs, so I need some more footballs.
Each year he got 2 weeks leave, but instead of going home, he came to training camp and worked out with us, which we kind of thought was admirable.
I always felt sorry for myself in training camp because I always hated training camp, you know, but I really felt sorry for Roger because he would fly all the way in from Vietnam or wherever he was stationed, and he'd practice and he'd go through the two-a-days, and then he'd go back to his duties.
Staubach didn't get to play in a real game for Dallas until 1969, 5 years after he was drafted. Yet the Cowboys' willingness to take a risk on Staubach, as well as Mel Renfro and Bob Hayes, gave them 3 future Hall of Famers in the same draft.
I often look at the 1964 draft as the time that the Dallas Cowboys really kind of told you what they were and what they were going to be. They were a team that thought outside the box before the rest of the league even knew there was a box. They took a running back, knew they'd make him a defensive back. They took a track man, felt he could become a wide receiver. They took a basketball player feeling like they could make him into a wide receiver, and they drafted a Navy officer because they knew at one time he could become a great quarterback. When a lot of other teams were locked into one way of thinking and one way of doing things, the Dallas Cowboys sent a message that they dared to be different.
In 1964, like today, New York was the cultural and economic center of the universe. It's where the World's Fair opened and where America was formally introduced to the Beatles.
Ringo, George, John.
All of New York's familiar football names belong to the Giants, an NFL power that featured stars like Sam Huff, Y.A. Tittle, and Frank Gifford. New York's AFL franchise, the Titans, were a box office failure in their first 3 seasons. In 1963, the team was bought by Hollywood super agent Sonny Werblin and renamed the Jets.
Werblin had a real familiarity with the entertainment business, and he understood a team is just an empty stage until you start putting stars on it.
The Jets used the 3rd overall pick in the 1964 AFL draft on Ohio State star fullback Matt Snell. 2 days later, the Giants also selected Snell in the 4th round of the NFL draft. The drafts were not televised, and Snell wasn't immediately aware of his selections.
There was, of course, no internet. There was no cell phone. There, no ESPN. So I remember my mother called me up, and she said, "Did you know you were drafted by the Giants and the Jets?" I didn't even know what she meant. What do you mean I was drafted by the Giants? I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know what a draft was. And I didn't even know there was a difference in the leagues and all that, because no one talked about the AFL. A day or two later, Sonny Werblin came out, and I was really impressed. He drove up in this long stretch limousine. He's all tan. The guy just reeked of money. So, and when you've been a poor kid from the inner city, you don't used to having anything, and you're impressed when you see someone like this. Sonny told me what he was willing to do. I'm going to give you a 2-year contract at 25 and 30, and we'll give you a $30,000 bonus. That sounds like all the money in the world to me. He told me, we're going to build a championship, and you're the starting point.
Werblin and the Jets not only offered more money than the Giants, but also a better opportunity.
My thought was, I want to play right away. I didn't want to go with the Giants and sit on the bench 4 or 5 years behind Frank Gifford and Webster and all those guys that I grew up watching. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to go with the AFL.
I remember being in a restaurant in Buffalo the night it was announced that we signed Matt Snell. And the sports anchor came on and said that the New York Jets just signed the #1 draft choice, and he was also drafted by the Giants. The crowd applauded because it was good for the AFL.
The AFL understood that if we're going to make a go of it, our New York franchise has to be strong. And Matt Snell gets signed by the Jets. So NBC sees this, and they say, we'll dump extra money into the TV pool. This is going to help us get viewers. This is a more viable league now than it was before.
Part of that agreement was some of those AFL franchises got an advance, and they used that advance to sign players away from the NFL.
Snell has the Jet fans roaring tonight as he carries 28 times for 168 yards. The Locust Valley, Long Island native is tough to bring down. He never gives up. The Rookie of the Year, and the Jets have him. That's Matt Snell.
There's no doubt in my mind that that was as big an impact signing as Namath. It didn't get the notoriety that the Namath signing did because it didn't involve the dollars and it wasn't a quarterback, but it meant so much for the AFL in terms of its own credibility and in terms of the credibility of one of its most important franchises in the biggest market in the country.
If Snell had signed with the NFL's Giants, the Jets would not have had a star presence in New York in 1964. And the AFL may not have signed as lucrative a deal with NBC. Money from the TV contract helped the Jets land Joe Namath a year later. If Namath hadn't signed with the AFL, he would have ended up with the NFL's St. Louis Cardinals, who had drafted him in the first round. Instead, 3 years later, Namath, Snell, and the Jets shocked the world by defeating the NFL champion Colts in Super Bowl III.
Here goes Snell again. And Snell has been outstanding today.
Ain't no use running wide now. We were beating them out with the first half.
That's right. That's a game plan. That's a game plan. We'll stay with it.
All right, now we get a touchdown up there.
Joe Namath may have guaranteed the Super Bowl win, but it was Snell who delivered it.
Snell has been a big man for the Jets today. He's run 30 times for 121 yards. The New York Jets are the world champions in a stunning upset.
I just knew that once we won the game, Joe was the MVP, so that's fine with me. But I tell you what, Sonny Werblin felt so bad about it. He bought me a 1969 Cadillac Eldorado. Mint green, same Jet colors, you know. He said, because I think you were the MVP, so I said, okay.
In most people's minds, the Namath signing eclipses everything else that happened with the Jets over that period. But they would not have become world champions without Matt Snell.
Matt Snell may not have ended up in the Hall of Fame, but as much as anyone, this 1964 draft choice helped forever change the football landscape of a team, a league, and a city. In the summer of '64, the talk of 49ers training camp centered on number 81, Dave Parks, the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. The rookie's main goal, become a force in San Francisco's passing attack.
I played defense. When I was in college, I was probably a better defensive player than offensive player, so I've always had it pretty tough. I don't mind contact.
I never thought about being a pick, that early. But I made sure that people knew that, or I tried to make sure that they knew that I didn't want to play defense. I want a shot at offense.
Parks made the most of his opportunity and quickly established himself as one of the league's best receivers.
I can't think of a teammate that I enjoyed more or had a better relationship with than David Parks. He was just as good as there was for the years that we were teammates. You know, David Parks, who was the best player in the game at that time, that's when the whole franchise started moving the right way.
His first 3 years were phenomenal. Up to that point in NFL history, only Tom Fears had caught more passes than he had in his first 3 years. Only Harlan Hill had caught passes for more yards than he had in his first 3 years. In his second season, he caught 80 passes for 1,344 yards and 12 touchdowns. Nobody reached those three levels for another 16 years.
When you play the 49ers, you try and shut the lid on Dave Parks and hope for the best. There is no other way.
Parks was an elite player, but he wasn't being paid like one. With his initial contract near an end in 1967, Dave refused to knuckle under to a front office reluctant to recognize his demands. When Niners general manager Lou Spadia dragged his feet in negotiations, Parks announced he would seek free agency by playing out his option, becoming one of the first players to challenge a decree called the Rozelle Rule.
What the Rozelle Rule was, essentially, it said in those rare cases in which a player plays out his option and then signs with another team, the team that lost the original player would get some sort of compensation. And that compensation would be determined by the commissioner of the league. The commissioner gave compensation that was often in excess of the perceived value of the player signed away. It dissuaded teams from signing players away. It dissuaded players from wanting to go because there weren't really any options out there.
I did want to play ball. And it's not my ego. I just thought I could help any team. I didn't hear from anybody. I wasn't sure how the process would go. But I didn't see how no one was going to be interested in me.
The Saints finally ended the silence after Parks asked former Niners teammate Billy Kilmer to speak in his behalf to New Orleans management.
I begged Coach Fears to get him, because I knew he played out his option and he wanted to make more money, and he got more money.
Billy just took it down and then back out. Well, Ziggy, I'm gonna run a little deeper, and I thought I got him out.
He made a lot of money for the times. I don't know what he made, but if he was making $50,000, that was a ton of money.
Parks liked his new contract, but Saints owner John Meekum wasn't as happy after hearing the cost of his new receiver.
Dave Parks, first player taken in the '64 draft, when he's signed away by the Saints from the 49ers, Commissioner awards 2 first-round draft picks.
When we found out that I had to give 2 number 1s, I was very upset. That's ridiculous. All I wanted was get my deal done where I could play ball. I wasn't trying to do anything except get what I thought I was worth.
Making that jump as a free agent at a time when not many players were doing that. It was a courageous thing to do. A necessary step, maybe one of the first ones that the players were making towards the kind of freedom that they enjoy today. It had to start somewhere, and a guy like Parks bit the bullet.
The Patriots were sure they'd locked up a natural gate attraction after setting their sights on Boston College's Jack Concannon.
They traded up in the first round, and it's the first time, near as I can tell, that any team, AFL or NFL, had ever done that, had ever traded up to the first pick in the draft to target a particular player.
But instead of signing with his hometown team, Concannon took the money and ran to the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles. The AFL had better luck with the glamour quarterback of the '64 draft.
Southern California's Pete Beathard was the pass master of the Pacific Coast.
Beathard's stock zoomed after his Rose Bowl record 4 touchdown passes clinched a Trojans' perfect season.
I was a good running back. I played defense. I could do a lot of things. And I had a very strong arm. Johnny Unitas and Jack Kemp were quoted in saying the strongest arm in football is Beathard.
Pete was the number 1 pick of both Detroit and Kansas City. But the Chiefs had distinctive family ties with the Southern Cal quarterback that put them in the driver's seat.
Don Klosterman was the man running the Kansas City Chiefs for Lamar Hunt in those days. Don Klosterman was a good friend. His brother and I played together at Cal Poly in college.
I got to know Don when I was junior in high school, and so the relationship there was family to family. My parents knew the Klostermans.
The Lions had already lost 2 previous number 1 picks to the AFL. A botched talent evaluation would cost them another.
General manager at the time was a guy named Ed Anderson, I believe, and he said, we drafted you number 1. I said, you have 2 good quarterbacks. You have Mel Plum and Earl Morrall. What are you going to do with me? And he said, no. We drafted you as a defensive back. I said, okay. I don't want to play defense.
Hello, I'm Executive Vice President General Manager Don Klosterman.
And Klosterman came out and said, here's the contract. Do you want it or not? And of course, Detroit had already told me they wanted me as a defensive back. And so Klosterman and I met in a bar up in Beverly Hills on Sunset Boulevard, and I signed.
The '64 draft also included on-field innovators. Bills' 12th round selection, Pete Gogolak, was pro football's first soccer-style kicker. San Francisco 9th round pick, Howard Mudd, played guard for 7 seasons, then spent 40 years in coaching, pioneering zone blocking techniques that helped the Colts win a Super Bowl.
Takes the stand, nets out, pumps again, throws, touchdown!
Howard had a lot more impact in the overall offensive philosophy of the Colts than most offensive line coaches do.
Yeah, well, the guard then dual
When Peyton Manning came off the field after a series, he very often went right to Howard Mudd.
I made him right.
Coaching was also where Vikings 15th round pick Monty Kiffin made his name.
Monty Kiffin became very, very well known later as the orchestrator of the Tampa 2 defense. 2 deep safeties and dropping a middle linebacker into the middle of those 2 safeties for additional pass defense.
Gannon looking, throws up the pass intercepted. It's Darren Brooks all the way. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Some members of the class of '64 made their greatest contributions through social change, such as 49ers free agent running back Dave Kopay.
Dave Kopay is going to be remembered as the first NFL player that came out and admitted that he was gay, lived a homosexual lifestyle. I think he was the first professional athlete in any professional sport that actually came forward in a very public way. And he wrote a book about playing in the NFL as a gay man.
It was a way to dispel all the myths that people had about gay folks, to start to be honest with myself, to change people's attitudes. And it was amazing how many people told me that our book changed their lives, that it gave them permission to do and be who they wanted to be, regardless of their sexual orientation.
Another author from '64 was Cowboys receiver Pete Gent, who provided a behind-the-scenes view of the game in his groundbreaking novel, North Dallas 40.
The thing I think about with Pete Gent, with North Dallas 40 and just showing the other side of football, is that it was sort of the literary version of Hard Knocks decades later. You read North Dallas 40, it was the Hard Knocks of the 1970s.
Pro football becomes very personal, yet it becomes like group therapy. You're out there with the 11 guys on your offensive team. You hurt for them, you care about them. But it still boils down to the basic fact that life is telescoped into 2.5 hours on a Sunday afternoon.
11 men drafted in 1964 are now enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 10 as players. The other, a 7th-round choice out of Wichita State.
I really hadn't anticipated it. I didn't really know that I was even a consideration for anybody.
Bill Parcells was chosen by the Detroit Lions as an offensive tackle, but would last only a few weeks in training camp.
Eventually, they let me go, and I was free to go do what I want, which was coaching.
Hey, fellas, this is what you work all off season for. This is why you lift all them weights. This is why you do all that.
The Hall of Fame coach was drafted 1 spot behind a Hall of Fame receiver, Bob Hayes, the Olympic gold medal sprinter picked by the Cowboys.
He had the kind of speed that's just hard to imagine. I mean, he could run beyond the defense. He certainly changed the game because it changed the structure and the philosophy of defenses.
Hayes brought on the advent of zone defense, where defenders played in a deeper area to try to combat his speed.
I saw the safety over, but he came back in. He didn't want to take off our deep post. Right.
I'd like to be remembered as the fastest man ever put on a uniform in pro football. If you are a person that revolutionized the passing game of football, then that's awesome.
As a 7th rounder, Hayes was a true find. With the 11th overall pick, Paul Warfield also proved to be a steal.
Ryan seeks out another Cleveland rookie. He's Paul Warfield, and the former Ohio State star tumbles in for his first touchdown as a pro. Coach Blanton Collier knows he has a live one in Warfield.
In 13 NFL seasons with the Browns and Dolphins, Warfield would be an 8-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time Super Bowl champion, Miami's leading receiver in the 1972 perfect season.
I am very privileged to be a part of that 1964 draft class. This is the photo of the 1964 East All-Star football team, and all of these guys were drafted the same year that I was drafted in. I'm in the picture. Carl Eller, Dave Wilcox.
Like Warfield, Carl Eller and Dave Wilcox were future Hall of Famers. Eller was the 6th overall pick by the Vikings and would help form Minnesota's Purple People Eaters defense.
Oh, man, I was on him, man. I gave him a good lick over there, too. Yeah, I gave him a good lick.
Wilcox was a 3rd-round choice of the 49ers. While Wilcox was nicknamed the Intimidator, another member of the '64 draft class became known as the Interceptor. Iowa's Paul Krause was a 3rd-round choice of the Redskins. As a rookie, he led the league with 12 interceptions. In a 16-year career with Washington and Minnesota, Krause intercepted more passes than any player in history.
I can say nobody else has gotten 81 interceptions, just me. Nobody else can call their bike the Interceptor because I own that record. So that's good.
This is a Hall of Fame bust of a good-looking guy. That's me when I still had some hair.
Incredibly, 6 of the first 18 players caught in the draft in 1964 would reach the Hall of Fame. Overall, the 11 enshrinees from that draft are the most produced by any class in history.
I think just in terms of the number of Hall of Famers that came out of the class, the 1964 draft class has to be in the conversation of the greatest classes of football players ever.
Not only were these guys Hall of Famers, but, I mean, these guys were great Hall of Famers. Roger Staubach is and will always be one of the iconic figures in professional football. And you had the guys at the top like Paul Warfield and Charlie Taylor. But you also had guys further down the line that were almost afterthought kinds of players like Leroy Kelly, who goes on and succeeds Jim Brown in Cleveland.
That's really an amazing draft when you consider that so much about the drafting process in those days was relatively primitive. Even though the pool was smaller, the knowledge was so significantly smaller. And so before the draft, you really didn't know all that much about these players.
The '64 draft was remarkable. People define drafts in all kinds of different ways, but if that draft produced the most Hall of Famers of any draft, it's hard to argue against that as being the best draft ever.